this record really was kind of like us cutting all of the fat off of, what we were doing. That's not to say that like there was anything wrong with the work, because it's still like, I'm insanely proud of that record, and we all are. And like, we couldn't have gotten here without having written that record 100%. But on this record, we really wanted to just like kind of go for the throat. And that's not just like, that's not just commentary on like, oh, it's brutal. Like we just, there's songs on this record that are going for the throat, but they're beautiful. They're not super brutal. So like, we just really wanted to like cut to the chase of like what this band can do and do well, and like really like just lean into that. And I feel like we succeeded. I feel like it's 50 minutes long. It's like the shortest record that we've written since 2015. And there's like not really a second of music on this record that like, even now, like basically a year after recording it, that I can look back on and be like, maybe we could have cut that out.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Keefy of GhostCultMag.com. I am super stoked to be joined once again for, I think, the second time in my career, and the third or fourth interview with the band and their history, with Brody of Rivers of Nihil. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being back. I think the last time I saw you in person, I was still living in Brooklyn, and I saw you guys at St. Vitus several times, including the
Oh, yeah.
infamous Where Owls Live. I'm definitely in the front with my hoodie on. Some dude
Oh,
in
yeah.
the crowd like head punched me. I was just trying not to get hit, but I wanted to be right up front for that show.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
I'm glad to say that I followed the band for their, the whole arc of the band so far. And listen, anybody that's doing music 10, 15 years is a challenge. It's like a marriage. You have to keep a band together. It's hard through changes, but you guys have persevered, and I'm super stoked about this self-titled new album and kind of a new era of the band.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's good to be here though.
Yeah, of course, man. And of course, first and foremost, a self-titled record, and a record that has a self-titled song. I usually have a thing about 80s bands that were like, when you had a band name for a song, it was probably not a good idea. But first of all, like, why the self-titled record now after all these years? And of course the self-titled song, which is awesome, by the way. Great. Spoiler
Yeah.
alert, it's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I mean, we, the first four records were kind of under this conceptual arc, like this, they were the four seasonal albums. First album was a spring theme, second summer, third fall, and then the last record was the winter. And being that we kind of finished up that seasonal suite, also taking into consideration that, we knew when we finished the last record that we were going to have to figure out what the next record was going to be called, what the topics were going to be discussed and all that kind of stuff. We knew it was going to have to be, something different, something new, because in a lot of ways, even not taking the lineup changes and everything like that into consideration, we knew we were entering a new era of the band because we were closing out the seasonal albums. So we already knew we were going to be looking for something new for this record. But then when we had the lineup change, it really began to feel like a totally new era for the band, like from the ground up, really. We spent a lot of time thinking about like what the record should be called. And, we thought that being how strong we believe this new material is, and how it is like a new era of the band, and it does feel like a powerful record to us. We really felt like putting the band's name behind it, not dissimilar to the way that like Metallica put their name behind their fifth record. I mean, there's no denying that was something that we looked at for an influence when it comes to giving the album a name. We felt like this was like a real point in our career where we could be like, this is Rivers of Nile now. If you know who we are, like, pay attention. And if you don't know who we are, maybe start here. Because I know when I was a kid and I would be looking through bands that I didn't know at all. When I would be looking through their albums, a lot of times if I saw like the album name that was also the band name, I would end up starting there, you know, because I figured there was probably something about that record that was like important to the band, whether it was, you know, their first record, their debut, or whether it was, you know, a turning point in the band or something like that. I always kind of gravitated towards self-titled records, you know, as a starting point as a young fan of music. So that was another thing that we considered, like, being that it is a new era for the band, you know, anyone who's not been along for the ride thus far, you know, giving this name the self-titled moniker might be, you know, a good idea, because it could give people a place to start. And then, you know, once we onboard them with the new stuff, then they can dig back as far as they want to, really.
Right on. Thank you for that answer. I will say there's definitely material here that sounds very familiar, like your old friend coming back for a visit with a six-pack. And then there's some absolute bonkers new stuff that I think the band has incorporated. I know you're the one member of the band that doesn't sing, but let's start talking about vocals, right? Because obviously, look, there was a big change when Jake left and Adam started to become a more prominent vocalist, and Andy coming in. But this vocal approach on this record absolutely took my breath away. It's probably one of my favorite things about the record, besides the songs themselves, is the vocal performances. There's some, don't get scared, everybody. There's some gnarly, brutal vocals of different shades, but the singing on this record is honestly mind-blowing. I gotta be real.
Yeah, well, thanks. You know, having Andy kind of come into the fold on this record, you know, it was something that we weren't expecting, of course, you know, but when the opportunity did present itself for him to kind of come and start working with us, we were pretty excited about it, because obviously, you know, he's got a super unique voice. You know, you could pick him out of a crowd like in a second. And, you know, we've been best friends with the guy, specifically me and Adam. We've been best friends with the guy since like 2007. I mean, we're Black Crown Initiate. His other band is from Reading as well. You know, our bands came up playing shows together. Before our bands even existed, we were going to a lot of the same shows together. I mean, I remember me and Adam and Andy all ended up at the same Meshuggah Cynic Faceless show back in like 2008, I think, something like that. It was right after Meshuggah put out Ubsen, right after Faceless put out Planetary Duality, and right after Cynic put out Trace and Air. And like, I remember the three of us were at that show, and just like, you know, I felt like that was like a really transformative experience for the three of us. And now my point with all this is like, we're cut from like the same cloth in a lot of ways, and we have a really old, you know, musical language between us. So bringing him in was really great, because we just get each other. We've known each other for so long. I mean, Andy's obviously sang on the title track for Where Else Know My Name, you know, and he's been involved with the band, you know, whether it's just, you know, coming to the shows or, you know, being around when we're writing stuff. He showed us stuff that he was working on for Black Crown. Like, there was a lot of tape trading going on behind the scenes, you know. So Andy has this like pretty interesting perspective on Rivers of Nihil, because he's been involved but not really involved for like the entire time that we've been a band. He has this cool third person perspective on our career, really. So him coming in has kind of given us a fresh view on what we do, what we've done, you know, what we sound like. Because I think we've been doing this for so long that sometimes you lose sight of like what does your band sound like? What is your sound? And like on this record, in a lot of ways, I think Andy helped us kind of like rediscover what that was, just because he's been watching us for so long. You know, he was kind of able to come in and like identify things that like, hey, this is like totally something that you guys would have done on this record, or, you know, this is totally like a you thing. And, you know, anyway, but so he's kind of just, he knows the band, he knows us. And I think all that history that we have together really brought something special to the table when it came time for him to add his vocals to the album. He's super good at like hearing harmonies and stuff that like we wouldn't have heard before. He's really great at like, if I write something instrumentally and he kind of has a melody in his head for vocals, he's really great at helping me tweak like my riffs and stuff so that they like, you know, oh, well, if it resolves to this, like it would sound bigger, you know, during like the singing part if you change just this one little thing. And, you know, yeah, so I mean, it's the vocals are definitely like the big like level up on this record, I would say. I mean, we have, you know, 3 dudes singing, you know, like I'm the only one that's not in the band now singing. So yeah, it's cool. Like it's like kind of like it's like a Mastodon kind of feel in a lot of ways. You know, you have that 3-part harmony kind of thing going, like a death metal Bee Gees or something, I guess. But yeah, it's been really great. And, you know, he's been super easy to work with. Like, I feel like this album just kind of happened. Like, I think, and I say that in a positive way, a lot of records feel like they're a real grind to write, you know? And I feel like this material just kind of like came out, happened really naturally. You know, a lot of the time leading up to this record was really hard for all of us personally and as a band. But I think once we got through all of the rough stuff, you know, and things kind of calmed down, and then, you know, the new lineup kind of took shape, you know, I think it was just like, we all speak the same, you know, musical language and understand each other on a pretty like, in a pretty deep way. So I think that all just like really translated to how this record came to be, and ultimately how good the performances ended up being, especially the vocals, you know, like it definitely, like I said, is like, you know, I don't want to say it's the star of the show, but it's definitely like the most noticeable difference from any of our previous records. I mean, there's just some absolutely insane vocal moments on this record.
Yeah, much agreed. And you helped me with my segue there because, yeah, absolutely Mastodon vibes. But also, I think Andy sometimes reminds me of ICS Vortex when he was in Dimmu Borgir.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and then also randomly, like how you guys use the gang vocals and the group vocals and the harmony vocals in spots really reminded me of, you know, something about like how Yes used to do when they had Trevor Rabin, Chris Squire, and John Anderson all at the same time in the 80s, or like, you know, classic Pink Floyd,
Yep.
even like just the vocal stacking. So beautiful job, beautiful composing. Nothing feels forced. It's beautifully, it works with the songs beautifully, but it's also will surprise you on every track that it's, you know, featured. But, you know, yeah, just wonderful. And then again, don't get nervous, everybody. It's a brutal record with heavy ass riffs and great parts and a lot of gnarly vocals also. But just like I had to call this out first and foremost. So is it safe to say it's not quite a concept record? Yeah, I think in a way all your records are concept records to me, but it does feel like the music is interconnected.
Yeah, I would say that this album, as compared to say like the last 2 records, The Work and Where Owls Know My Name, I would say that like the hard, like conceptual through line on this record is like maybe less defined than on the last 2 records. I feel like this record covers like broader subjects, but kind of it does kind of have like an overall. Granted, I don't write the lyrics or anything, so I'm kind of like spouting this off from what I've talked to Adam about and stuff like that. But this record, you know, the Rivers of Nihil title, you know, for a long time we've been asked like, well, what does the band name mean? And you know, we've never like really had a good answer. For a long time, I was like, I would just tell people like, oh, it just means rivers of nothing. You know, it's like dark, you know. That was really as like far as I got with it. But Biggs he kind of came up with this, you know, idea for this record where, you know, each song talks about, you know, a different kind of thing, a different kind of topic. But overall, I would say this stuff could all be like put under the umbrella of this idea that, you know, the world has there's a lot of opportunity to be pulled into like the darkness, you know, whether it's, you know, depression, anxiety, paranoia, you know, stuff that's going on politically, stuff that's going on socially, wars, you know, like money problems, like drug addiction, just like there's so many things in the world, especially now, that can just really like pull you into like these really, really dark places. It's almost easier to end up there. It feels like it's easier to end up there than to not end up there a lot of the time. And I think the Rivers of Nile is like really kind of like it's like a metaphor for that place of like darkness and despair that you can kind of like fall into so easily in life and be sucked away into. And some people will spend their whole lives trapped in it. But ultimately, you want to try to like reach for the light and, like find like the good in the world and find the good in those around you and whatnot. So I think, like I said, it's not really like a concept album per se, but it does kind of have this like, general idea of like finding the light in the darkness and trying not to, be pulled into this river of Nile, I guess. So
Nicely done. I would say also it's a vicious record. I know you guys had something to prove to yourselves coming in here, and I know Metal Blade or your management would never pressure you guys to continue to top yourselves, but it's a fierce record. Like there's some absolute bangers and a lot of hostility. These lyrics are extremely, again, I use the word gnarly to describe some of the vocals, also gnarly lyric content. Like it's extreme and in the best way. And I really dig it. Again, not one of the lyricists, and I do love that it's a collaborative lyrical process, just like all the songwriting. I imagine. I'm sure you guys all bring in your own things, and I know Biggs likes to drive that process in the past, but like it's really feels like a complete record, and it's not like that's why I was like, it feels like a concept record. The songs do feel a little interconnected a bit in the classic sense, but yeah, I love how just it's harsh, man. It's good. It's good for the soul right now.
yeah, good to hear.
We need that right now. We need some. We can't be resting on our laurels in this day and age.
Definitely
2025,
not.
this shit is everything's on fire. Like we need
Yeah, you're not wrong.
some catharsis out of this life, and music and art is the way to go.
Yeah.
Just for you personally, what do you do, to get ready for a record? Do you don't reference anything you've ever done before? Do you just, do amass ideas? I feel like every guitar player has like a tape somewhere of like all my riffs I haven't used yet and things like that. Or do you just purely come up with a brand new thing every time to bring to the table?
I feel like on this record, I spent more time examining our past works than I have on any other record, I think on the work, that was definitely like a COVID album. It was like we wrote it like when we had just endless time, and like I mean it's reflected so obviously in like what that album ended up being like. I mean, it's like an hour and 10 minutes long. I mean, some of the songs are like, I mean, we had to make that record for ourselves to like prove to ourselves that we could like make this big prog, like almost like the Wall-esque kind of project, just an album that is like maybe a little bloated at times, like there's just some sections of that record that are just so self-indulgent, I feel like it couldn't have been written during any other time than during COVID, and I think that record was like a direct response to the success of Owls. We wanted to kind of like take things in a totally different direction. Everyone wanted Owls 2.0. And we were like, no, we're not going to give it to you. We're going to do something totally weird. And, it freaked a lot of people out at first, but, most of the people came around to like really loving the work. And like now, I hear that record referred to, by a lot of people in the same kind of breath as Where Owls Know My Name, like those two albums together. But like on this new record, I would say, as opposed to like previous albums where I kind of try to like, usually what ends up happening is I'll pick like an album, from an artist that I really like, that I kind of want to like use as like a guideline to like what I think, our next album could go like. Me and Biggs will talk about stuff early on too, just kind of like, lay out bullet points of like what we want to, what do we want to include in this? Like, we want like a recurring melodic motif or a recurring rhythmic motif, or, do we want a continuation of a song from a previous record, like a part two, all that kind of stuff. But on this new one, I found that we just kind of, at least for me personally, I just kind of was looking back at our discography, looking back at songs that we've played live over the years and wondering like, well, what is it about these songs that, lights people up so hard? And what is it about these songs that has kind of like turned them into B-sides over the years? And like kind of examined that and really just like leaned into on the work. Really, I wrote a lot of that record on piano. I wrote a lot of that record with like orchestral plugins. And then I kind of filled in the gaps with the heavy stuff, and it's reflected in what you hear on that album. It's just like, there's like 90 tracks on every song or more. It's like insane. It's a huge record. And on this one, I just kind of wanted to, I know it sounds, like a classic thing to say, but I kind of wanted to get back to basics on this record. And I ended up writing a lot of the songs just with guitar first, like I didn't touch any of the like keys or like additional like weirdo instruments that like, I leaned on so heavily like on the last record. I really wanted to focus on kind of getting back to like the riff, on this record. And that's what I realized, that like some of my favorite stuff that we've written over the years and some of the stuff that goes on to be our favorite stuff from our fans, is stuff that like I always remember starting as just like a riff, like me and a guitar in a room, not necessarily with like even a computer turned on or a recording session open or anything, just like me playing guitar. So I really wanted to like go for that on this record, just start with the riff. And I just really kind of wanted to get back to like writing with like the band up front, guitar, bass, drums, vocals, and then kind of like add in the extra stuff at the end if it needed it. And if it didn't, not adding it in, like I feel like we got it. I feel like we like really nailed the ratio on this one. There's like just enough prog and adventurousness and, plenty of like the classic, like Rivers of Nile, like heavy stuff. Like I feel like it's a really great balance. And then, adding all the like big vocal stuff on this record really just kind of like gives it a sound of its own while still kind of paying respect to everything that we've done up till this point.
Word. I have a sister podcast I do with my collaborator on vinyl and metal series and rock bands and stuff. And Nick is of the opinion that a perfect record is 42 minutes. And I'm always like, I think I need a little bit more than 42, but he's like, 42 is the sweet spot to keep his attention. And I was like, I think it's closer to an hour for me, but you could pick nits. Stupendous answer there. Great stuff. I'm so pumped for people to hear this thing. I don't know if it's too soon for you to have a favorite track. I definitely have some of mine, but curious to know if you have a favorite moment on the record so far.
I really like Despair Church. For it, I really like the vocals on that song. I think they came out insane, and I really like the little like reprise with the saxophone at the end that we do. I think that's one of like the really cool moments on the album, just like musically. I really like Evidence because it's like just an ass beater. It sounds like something that we would have written on Monarchy, our second album, but like refreshed with the new lineup and everything. It's like it's like probably like my favorite like heavy song on the record. And I really like The Logical End because that song, it feels like something that we may have written on Owls. It like kind of follows like a similar song format to like what we did on The Silent Life. It has like these like big riffs, front loaded with big riffs. And then there's like this big break with like a big guitar solo, big sax solo. And then it goes into kind of like a post, like a black gaze kind of Deaf Heaven-y kind of section, like, and it really feels like something that we would have written on Owls. So that's, I would say, Despair Church, Evidence, and The Logical End are three of my favorites. But I think Despair Church is like really like a good example of like something truly of this era and this era alone, because Andy and I wrote that song together, and then Patrick, our saxophone player, came up with the sax part at the end, like all on his own. So it was like that song was truly like collaborative on all fronts, and I think it's a really great example of like what this lineup is capable of doing together.
Right on. Despair Church is definitely my favorite track on the record. Shout out to Patrick, by the way, who's all over this thing.
Yeah,
And you guys for bringing back the sexy sax again and again. And I think
yeah,
so many bands, they probably wouldn't admit it because, you know, it's just such a time honored instrument for rock music and prog music. But, you know, right after you guys started doing the sax, Ghost has the big sax solo in their big hit song. Like it, you know, I think Dorothy, the rocker singer, has a song with a prominent sax in the middle. Like I was like, oh, it's a thing now where people are like,
yeah,
hey, remember that thing? That thing, it's not just Huey Lewis in the News or Chicago. This is a
yeah,
great instrument. Let's put it into some badass songs. And
yeah.
I'm so pleased, you know, so pleased to hear it.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see. I even saw the one of the last Sleep Token singles even has a sax solo on it. So we're in the arenas now, right?
Yeah, right. It's going big. It's going
Right.
big. All the Sleep Token fans. Tough fan base though, but good band.
Yeah.
Really quick, just the last question or two for you. You know, we had done a thing last year. St. Vitus closed, and I said offline how one of my first times seeing the band was for Owls several times at Vitus, and we had done like a retrospective when they closed. And I hope those guys can reopen somewhere else in New
Yeah.
York City. But we were like the top shows ever at Vitus, and that Owls full album playthrough show was like in my top 10 ever
Oh,
for memories of living in Brooklyn and going to Vitus. That was such an insane show, just like the end of that tour, the end of that cycle, and
yeah.
then to close it with that. I'm sure you did other festivals and things like that with Owls, but like just unbelievable night. Do you have any special memories of that night?
Yeah, I mean, it was that was like that was just like a really important moment for us. I think we sold that out like two nights in a row. Like I think the first night sold out like pretty much immediately. And then we added a second night since it was at the end of the tour. So the first night we did it with the bands that we were touring with. It was Entheos, Wolf King, and Conjurer. And then the second night we did it with Outer Heaven and Imperial Triumphant, you know, just to kind of stagger, you know, the lineup for the evenings. But yeah, that was like pretty big deal for us because we grew up. We came up as a band, like playing shows at Vitus all the time. Like I remember one of the first times we ever played at Vitus, we opened the show. I think it was a Battlecross show, and oh, what was the other band that was on that show? Singer's name was Jill. Sorceress? Wasn't
Huntress.
Huntress? Yes,
Rest
yes.
in peace. Rest in
Yeah,
peace
yeah,
to
yeah,
Jessica.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. It was I think it was a co-headliner, but we opened that show and like there was like no one watching us, you know, and we just kept we played there so many times over the years. Like in a lot of ways, it feels like New York kind of like brought us up more than Philly did, even though we're like from Philly, sort of. Like we met Ben at the Lit Lounge, playing in the basement of that place with the binary code, and yeah, so we have like a lot of history with New York as a band. And when we were able to come up there on that Owls tour and sell it out two nights in a row. And like, I mean, there's the Kerrang video of it is on YouTube, you know, people can watch it. But yeah, it just felt like a really important moment in the history of the band, you know, like it felt like things were finally clicking, you know, with people. Like, you know, the band really just like leveled up in such a huge way on Where Owls Know My Name. And like, it was the first time that we were ever doing a tour, like a headlining tour where like shows were selling out and like people were like, the whole room is like screaming lyrics, and like that never happened to us before. Like when we started that tour and people were like packing these shows out, we were like, what's going on? Like we thought it was just kind of like we had never played headlining gigs to like packed rooms like that before, you know? And yeah, so it was just like such a a big change for us. But when we did Vitus 2 nights in a row sold out, like that was like a really important like time for all of us, I think, because we felt like, this is kind of where we started in New York, and like now we're headlining at Vitus, where when we started playing here, like no one gave a shit about us. We like probably put our drum kit in the bathroom or something, and like walked through the crowd and like sold like one half of a t-shirt or something, like it was. And now here we are, like headlining these 2 nights, sold out both nights. And, the vibe was just like very, very good. It just was like, it's definitely one thing that I will always remember, the Vitus shows. I wish I had like posters of those shows that I could like frame and put on my wall. I'm sure I could probably track them down somewhere, but yeah, it was like a really important moment for the band. I think it was like really a sign that like things are, it's working finally, basically. So yeah, I definitely, I look back and that is definitely like a key moment in the band's history for me. Absolutely.
Me too, as a fan, just straight up. And
Oh,
just for a last question, thank you for sharing all that. I appreciate it.
yeah.
Last question, I always like to end with a wild card question, and sometimes the wild card questions write themselves. If you had to run out of the house, beside family, friends, and pets that I hear in the background, what guitar behind you are you grabbing if you could only grab one in an
Only,
emergency?
only one? I mean,
That's a
probably,
tough one.
probably this guy. This is the one that I've been playing for like the last 2 years. And yeah, I probably grabbed this one just because this guitar was with me through like some of the roughest times personally, and roughest times just in the band's history. And I wrote most of the new record on it. So yeah, I'd probably have to grab that guy.
Right on. Shout out to the typo negative green lipstick pickup there.
Yep, always.
Good stuff, Brody, man. So good to see you again. Rivers of Nihil coming out. Self-titled album coming out May 30th from the great Metal Blade Records. It's so good to catch up with you. Thank you for spending this time with us. And just best of success. Good luck out on the road. We'll see you in May.
Yeah.
Hopefully, keep it going, man. Keep it going. We'll keep listening. You keep making more.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.